This is a critical incident community briefing for an incident that occurred yesterday. I know I provided a little bit of a brief statement last night. So the next slide, there's some cautionary things that we always tell you guys, because I know you are live streaming it, right? Somebody's live streaming it, Channel 7, up you guys will, right? What you're about to see is just information about what we know today. The reason for preparing this briefing is so the community as a whole has a better understanding of what led to the use of force. And again, based on what we know today, and more importantly, what the body camera is showing. So it's not the officer's perspective, the context as to what they were feeling, what they were seeing. It's just what the body camera shows from a different angle than what we see it. The word of caution: the images and information you're about to see may be disturbing, so viewer discretion is advised. So this is the scene overview. The original stop was on North St. Clair Street, just south of East 2nd. And the critical incident, the Oshawott shooting, occurred on St. Clair, just north of East 3rd. And that's just the overall picture of that area. The next is scene overview, where circle is where the Oshawott shooting occurred. And as you can see from a reference perspective, that's the Dayton Metro Library Main to the right side of the screen. The next picture is this Google overview looking from the library towards St. Clair and the location where the shooting occurred. So investigation, and again, I'm going to preface this thing repeatedly. This is not based on officer's perspective. This is based on the body camera footage that we have. We're not going to try to conjecture about what they were thinking, why they were doing what, but we're going to say this is what the footage shows from an angle that is, most of our officers put the body camera in the center mass area, so not really from what they're seeing from their eyes. Dayton officer was on routine patrol in downtown when he observed an individual on a bike commit a traffic violation. The officer initiated a stop at the corner of East 2nd Street and North St. Clair Street. During the stop, the suspect fled on foot southbound on North St. Clair Street. The officers engaged in foot pursuit. During the foot pursuit, the suspect pulled out a handgun. The officer then pulled out his handgun in response. And we will show you, slow down, it was much later in the encounter where the officer actually pulled his handgun out while he's struggling with somebody who's armed. Again, that's what the body camera showed. The officer gave multiple commands which were ignored by the suspect. The struggle ensued, after which suspect was able to break free. Suspect tried to run away, during which he dropped his handgun, or handgun. Then the officer reholstered his handgun. Officer went hands-on with the suspect again as they both went to the ground. During the struggle on the ground, and we'll show that to you on the body camera footage, what appears to be the individual intentionally going towards the handgun that he has just dropped. Additional officers arrived on the scene. As the struggle continued, one officer discharged his handgun, striking the suspect. It was one shot, that we know, one round that was discharged. The officer on the scene then secured our suspect and immediately rendered first aid. The suspect was then transported by Dayton medics to a local hospital where he was later pronounced and succumbed to his injuries. So what you're about to see now is radio traffic. What I'm about to hear is radio traffic and see body-worn camera footage. The footage does contain violent images and strong language. Your discretion is advised. As has been our past practice, we're going to stop the body camera right as the first shot and first and only shot is fired. I'm not going to show the actual shooting on that. There's enough trauma that occurs in our community, and we are not going to contribute to that. This is a traumatic situation as it is for everybody involved, including our officers. No officer that I know of in my lifetime of almost 35 years joins the police department with the purpose of injuring or harming somebody else. Sometimes these things occur based on the action and behavior of individuals that we're dealing with. So this is radio traffic. Now this is compressed. what this is about a 3-minute and change interaction between the first officer, second officer arriving on the scene, and the shots being fired. What we're doing is, because it's a lot of silence there, so we're compressing that so you can hear all the radio transmissions from, I believe, the initial officer.
214 dispatch of the office, one on the bike at St. Clair and Second.
Clear.
Second for me, send me another group.
I guess in cruise to St. Clair and Second.
Connecting. North on St. Clair towards 3rd Street.
Restriction on east. 214, where you at?
3rd and St. Clair, 3rd and St. Clair.
Clear.
Got shots fired.
Where is he? 3rd and St. Clair. 99 at 3rd and St. Clair.
Cancel 99, we got him in custody, we need a medic.
Clear, I'll start a medic.
So next one is actually the body cam footage from the initial officer that made the stop. We're going to slow it down in the next portion. It's very quick. One of the things I want to let you know that what we know and the video that's slowed down will show you a little better, that the officer doesn't really pull his gun out until way later in the thing, even though the individual is actually armed and has taken steps to, when the gun is dropped, the individual picks the gun up again, and the officer still doesn't, because that'd be conjecture on my part, but the officer doesn't pull his weapon until he's able to create some distance. So let's play the video. It's normal speed, so it's very fast, and we'll show you a little slower speed right after this.
The reason I stopped you is because you were riding on the sidewalk and you don't have a front light.
I don't have a front light?
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't no, you talking about on the other street?
Like you're coming down.
It wasn't it ain't no bike lane over there. That's why I got in the bike lane.
Okay.
It wasn't no bike lane.
So you need a front light?
I got a reflector.
No, it has to be a light, sir.
Damn.
What's your
I
name?
know that. Reginald Thomas.
Reginald? You got any weapons on you, man?
Nah.
Okay. You mind if I pat you? I'll pat you down.
I get my ID.
I get to that. I can pat you down.
Give ID.
Hey, man, just listen up.
ID.
Just listen up. Hey.
Look, this is why I keep my ID.
Okay, I know. Relax.
I'm just saying.
You're going so fast. Relax, man. Just have a conversation.
I'm trying to give you my ID, bro.
Okay, I will ask you that. Do you have any weapons on you? Any gas?
No.
Okay. I'm gonna pat you down, all right?
Dude, I can give you my ID, bro. Take my ID.
Stop reaching out.
Stop.
All right, stop.
Why are you grabbing on me, bro?
I'm patting you down.
For what? Why
All
are
right,
you
stop.
touching me?
All
I'm
right.
uncomfortable, bro. Stop touching me, bro.
Dispatch, taking off for me. Send me another crew.
Stop touching me, bro.
Stop reaching! Stop reaching! Stop reaching! North from St. Clair towards 3rd Street. Stop reaching! Stop! Stop reaching!
Bro. Stop grabbing on me, bro.
He's got a gun! He's got a gun! He's got a gun! Stop!
Oh.
Stop! Drop it! Drop your gun! Right here!
Oh.
Right here!
Stop, bro. Stop it.
Right here, guys! Right here, guys! He's got a gun! Drop it! Drop it now! Drop it now!
So we're going to show you the next. We're going to slow it down. It's not the whole way thing, but a couple of things to note. I don't know if you picked that up because normal speed. One is that the person, our officer, didn't really take his gun out until much later in the encounter, and the individual did drop his gun when challenged, but the officer had his handgun out, and as soon as he did that, the officer reholstered at that time. And if you noticed in the one, again, the slow motion will show a little better, the gun is dropped somewhere in the grassy area from what the camera shows, and when the struggle ensues, they're by the grate. So just looking at a very estimate, and again, I don't want to add to what an officer might have perspective, 4 to 6 feet away, and you see that by the time there's a portion in the camera, you see where the hand reaches out towards the weapon. And that's about, from what we can estimate based on what the scene was, about 4 to 6 feet away before the other officer comes up and fires. Now this is the footage from the same officer in slow motion. Some of it is regular speed, some of it we're slowing it down, so we can give you perspective of what the body camera is showing. And as you saw in the normal speed, a lot of times you don't see anything because the body camera is right here somewhere. So it's not whatever the officer perception is, the perspective is. So let's display that. Looks like the officer is down. The individual stopped right there. So it looks like the gun gets dropped for whatever reason. I'm not sure why, but the individual then picks up the gun, and the officer actually has not pulled his weapon out as of yet.
Oh! Stop grabbing on me, bro! He's got a gun!
Weapon on the hand of the suspect, as you see shadow, that's when the officer actually pulls his weapon out. Drops the weapon. Officer reholsters right away. The threat is no longer there.
Oh! Right here! Stop, bro! Stop it! Right here, guys! Right here!
That's the gun, and that's our individual that was stopped, now reaching for that gun that he had just dropped. Now this is the second officer who's arriving. Now we couldn't play this in slow motion because the officers are protected under martial law, so our software is not to the place where we can just block officer's face, otherwise the whole video is blocked. So we're going to play it regular speed, and then we'll have some stills as to what the camera shows, or the body camera shows.
I got it. Drop it! Drop it now! Drop it now!
So as you notice, this is the officer that actually discharges his firearm, right? As you notice, he doesn't have a firearm in his hand this time. He is hands-on with the individual. So so again, those things that we showed you are at the same time, but they're not synchronized in that sense. So as you saw in the first in the regular speed, there is some movement on the camera shows for the gun that's going towards. It looks like towards the officers. This is when the second officer appears to make a decision to discharge his firearm. Right? Play that. So at this point is when the second officer, who's hands-on helping the first officer, takes his weapon out and discharges one round that unfortunately resulted in the individual's death. So this is the footage as the second officer is arriving on the scene. The first officer is struggling. You can kind of it's kind of blurry, but you can see on the left middle side, there's a handgun. There's our suspect who appears to have his hand on the weapon, and the other officer, the first officer, is making sure that he had his hand on the weapon itself to make sure that it's not being that it stays there and it's not used in any fashion. This again is a still, right, Patrick? It's a still of the handgun, the suspect's hand on it, and our officer's hand on top of that to make sure that the weapon is not used or nothing happens with that. This is a still from the first officer's video, and remember we talked about as they're struggling on the ground after the weapon is dropped, that it appears that from the crate where the struggling shoot, that both individuals are going towards where the handgun was dropped, and this is the appears to be suspect's hand who was reaching for the gun that he had dropped a few seconds earlier. This is the third officer on the scene that arrived. As he arrives, he sees the two officers. One on the left is the first officer, one on the right is the second officer. They're both, but the camera what shows from that officer's body camera is they're trying to make sure that weapon is secured and not being manipulated by the suspect in question. This is the handgun that was recovered. Taurus .40 caliber. It was loaded. What we do know from a sheriff's office is that it was a functioning weapon. Officers requested medic at 9:26 p.m. Officers rendered first aid. The medics were dispatched 9:28 p.m. Arrived on scene 3 minutes later. Stabilized the individual, and the individual was transported at 9:41 p.m. To Miami Valley Hospital, where he did succumb to his injuries. This is the individual, Mr. Thomas. What we're only showing you is actually his convictions. Resisting arrest, assault, and aggravated menacing. He does have a lengthy history of all other things, but those are not convictions, so we're only going to show you convictions. Officer 1, which is the initial officer that made the stop, has 3 years of service, 2 commendations, no discipline. Officer number 2, 3 years of service, 3 commendations, no discipline. Commendations are attaboys, good job that the officers might have been involved in. As with all officer-involved shootings, we do 2 types of investigations. The first investigation is the criminal investigation, which is done, in this case, will be done by Montgomery County Sheriff's Office. The second investigation, after the criminal investigation is completed, will be the administrative investigation will be handled by Professional Standards Bureau. Now, understand from the criminal aspect, Montgomery County Sheriff's Office is not the one that's going to come to a conclusion about whether the shooting was justified or not. They will gather information, they will go to the prosecutor's office, and they'll go to see if the information that they have gathered is sufficient or not. Then, in my time, and I think in most times, all officer-involved shootings go to grand jury, and that's where the grand jury decides whether the actions were within lawful or not. Once that is done, irrespective of what the outcome is, then we'll do our internal investigation and see it's within policy. So you could have actions that are lawful, but not be within policy. The other is never going to happen, right? If it's unlawful, it can't be within policy. So I will answer questions about this incident that I might have. I will not be able to conjecture about anything that if you're asking me another question does ask what was the officer thinking, I can't tell you that. That is the officer's responsibility in the criminal investigation as to what their perspective was, what they saw, and when that's concluded. And it usually takes at least a couple of months for these things to conclude. But once they're concluded, it becomes part of public record. Questions, Mike?
Chief, you didn't talk about it in your opening statement, but the very beginning when the officer goes to him and he observed a traffic violation on the bike and was talking to him, he did ask a key question.
Yes, sir, he did.
About a weapon, correct?
Correct.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
So obviously in Ohio, you have the right to have a weapon, concealed weapon. But one of the requirements of that is that if we were to ask you, you have to disclose to us that you actually have a gun. So in this case, based on his convicted history, if he had said he had a weapon, we would have no standing. But he chose not to do that, and I'm not sure. There is some history of some other things that, at least for now, we don't believe we have a conviction. But if he was convicted of those things, he would be weapon under disability, so it would be a felony. But based on what we know today, and again, I'm going to preface about what we know today, that his criminal convictions did not make him ineligible for a weapon. But you can have a weapon, but if a law enforcement officer asks you, you have to respond in the affirmative. If you don't, that opens the door for some other things.
And again, that qualifies whether you're on a car or a bike, either way.
Doesn't matter, yeah.
Just to clarify, when before the first shot was fired, the suspect still had his hand on the gun, and I saw the first officer was trying to get his hand off of it. Did he lift it up a little bit?
Again, I'm just going to show what the body camera shows. There's some movement. There appears to be some movement. And again, from body camera perspective, that looks like best I can go, hand moving this way. And I don't know what the intent was from the individual, but that's what the body camera shows. And I can't tell you what the officers were seeing at that point. I can tell you that based on the initial officer when the individual drops the gun and then you can see slowly going towards it, in talking to our legal folks, they said that we would have standing at that point to discharge the firearms. Our officers chose not to do that because, again, our officers go through a lot to get hired. We scrutinize their background, who they are, psychological testing, polygraph testing. This is not something that any officer says, this is what I joined the department for, to discharge a firearm at anybody else. So that is very, again, that is, in the almost 35 years that I've been doing this job, that is pretty common among all officers. And I can tell you from an officer perspective, and again, this is just my observation of them, it's shaken them. Obviously, it's a traumatic event for the community at large, right? Because we don't want to see anybody. We don't want officer-involved shootings. We definitely don't want anybody dying because most of the shootings that we've had, our officers are the very people that then administer aid and are able to save the life, right? In this case, they were not able to do that.
And one more time, can you go over the law about having a light on your bicycle while the officer first approached the suspect? Well,
the law is that when it's dark, you're supposed to have a light. If you don't have a light, you can't ride a bike. You're talking about the justification of the stop. I'm going to tell you what the body camera shows, right? That is not for me to kind of conjecture upon. That is from the officer's perspective that they will have to, as the criminal investigation goes. But that is just from a law perspective, that is a lawful reason to stop. And one of the things that we have talked about, these stops happen all the time. And most of the time we don't even issue a ticket. It's more if it's dark, have a light. Okay, go on your way. That's usually what happens most of the time. And talking to Major Brian Johns and others who do patrol. We do make these stops all the time. And most of the time we don't even issue a summons. We have the ability to based on what the city has authorized to do, but most times we don't do it because we're really more from an education perspective. And again, we are a reactionary force. We react to what the behavior is in front of us, and then we react accordingly.
To go over again, the sheriff's office told you that weapon was operable, and you saw a magazine. How many? Was there one in the chamber and in the magazine? Talk about that a little bit.
I know magazine was loaded, one in the chamber. I don't know what the round is. I'm not a gun aficionado. I can't take a look at the gun like some of the other guys and say, that's this many rounds. That's not. I know what I have, and that's all I have.
But the gun was operable and it was loaded.
It was loaded, yeah.
He had prior history too. Was he also not allowed to have a gun?
The best that we can see, based on his convictions, he could have had a gun. Now, I don't know if there may be something, because sometimes you don't necessarily, and this is just running a record from my understanding, but again, based on the information that we have today, he could have had a gun, but he needed to disclose that part, and that was the reason that I think the officer was asking that question, because people do have a right to have a weapon. I mean, it's Ohio's Second Amendment. It's your right to have a weapon as long as you're not a weapon under disability. So that we do ask that question. And a lot of times people say, yeah, I'm armed. Okay, now we know you're armed. Not an issue.
And you mentioned it earlier too that, anytime there's an officer involved shooting, the community is always worried about it. I talked to a couple people and they told me that, it just happened around the corner where they lived and they're a little worried about it, What's the message? Like I said, you already answered this, but what's the message you want to send to the community just to ease any tensions after an incident like this?
I'm one of those guys that live right around the corner from this place, right? So, I mean, my message is always the same. Do not let isolated incidents define the whole city. Even in areas that we have a lot of much higher crime, if you really look at those areas, it's a very, very small area that contributes to that crime. So whether it's West Dayton, East Dayton, do not make assumptions of any city, and especially our city, based on what happens and thinking that the whole city is that way. This is an unfortunate incident, right? And so I will tell you that I can tell you that downtown, just based on our statistics, is the safest area in Dayton. Actually, all of Dayton as a whole is safe. Usually the violent crime that we do deal with usually happens among people who know each other and are That doesn't mean just justify it, doesn't mean that that's okay, but usually people know each other for some reason, one or the other, right? Whether it's domestic, whether some other issues are going on. A stranger, it's very rare, I'm not saying that doesn't happen, who gets victimized for violent crime. Now, property crime is a little different because motivations are different. Violent crime is usually, there's some anger issues going on. So if you're not in the business, you're not going to be, again, I will never say never, but historically that's been the case.
Chief, you talked
One
about
last
legal
question after
counsel,
Mike.
you talked about legal counsel kind of reviewing that incident as they were struggling with each other and going from the grate back over to where the gun had been dropped. Do you believe that kind of shows your officers trying to do everything possible not to escalate the situation into where it ended up?
I think I'm getting into conjecturing. You make the assumption yourself, sir.